Maren of Greycliff opened her eyes a half-count before the morning watch bell. She had been doing that for 7 years. She did not know any longer whether the bell woke her or whether her body told the bell when to ring. The two had grown into one another like a shoot grafted to a stalk, and on a morning like this, a morning of the great frost, with the air in the gate room cold enough that her breath stood in front of her face for a moment before it went away, the bell was the smaller half of the pair and her own waking was the larger. She lay still for 1 count more. She listened. Outside the slit window of the watchroom, she could hear the first frost cracks of the gatehouse roof shifting in the cold, the small, dry rustle of the watch brazier still alive in the corner, and beyond that, the long, even breath of the north tower stair, all the small breaths a stone tower makes when a city has grown old around it. She heard no foot at the gate. She heard no horn from the inner wards. She heard no bark of birch from Sern's room 1 floor below. A good morning, then. She sat up. Her gray-green watch cloak was hung on the iron peg above the cot. She put it on before her feet touched the floor. It was that kind of cold. And she tied the bone clasp of Northgate at her throat with 2 fingers that knew the shape of the clasp better than the shape of her own face. She put on her wide, soft leather wrist cord with the small bronze whistle. She put on her short, stout, iron-bound oak walking staff that she called her watch staff, leaning it across the cot against her knee. She did not put on her boots until she had laid her hand for 1 breath on the outer wall of the watchroom. The cold of the stone there on her bare palm told her how the night had gone. A shallow cold meant a shallow watch. A deep cold meant the men below had stayed near the brazier. Tonight the cold had been deep. She put on her boots. Down the inner stair of North Tower she went. 62 steps. She had counted them 3 times in the first month she had been given Northgate, and she had not counted them since. She came out into the gatehouse at the foot of the tower, where the long, narrow gate room had its low cot for the runner child, its iron-bound desk with the wax tablet on it, its small standing stove with last night's small kettle still warm on its plate, and the count's stone set into the inner wall, a smooth gray slab of limestone, 4 feet wide and 3 feet high, in which the captain of Northgate cut a small notch for every soul who came through the gate during her watch. 412,006 notches. That was the morning's count. She had cut every one of them. She lit the stove first. She lit the stove always first. The boy who slept on the cot, Kell of Southgate, 12 years old with his very dark hair cut short and uneven by his own hand, did not stir. She let him. She set the kettle on. She set the wax tablet open on the desk. Then she went to the count's stone. A small iron chisel hung on a leather thong from a peg beside the stone. She did not lift it. She laid her right hand flat on the soft band of the stone, the band where the next notch would go, and she stood for 1 breath. This was a thing the watch captain of Northgate did at the first wakening. It was older than the kingdom. Sern had told her, when she had first come to Northgate at 23, that the count's stone was the only mortal thing in Lyrnholt the king did not own. The king owned the gate. The king owned the wall. The king owned even the watch cloak. But the count's stone was the watch captain's. The captain's hand, laid flat on the stone in the morning, was a small, unceremonious act of taking the day onto her account. She took the day. It was the morning of the treaty council. By noon, the war would either end or it would not. She did not think about that. She went out to walk the gate. Frost on the cobbles. Frost on the iron bands of the gate. Frost on the chains of the small inner wicket. Frost on the long, curved horn that hung beside the wicket on its leather strap. She struck the strap with her watch staff. A small, dry sound, not loud, only enough to make the leather move, only enough to test that the leather had not frozen stiff. It had not. Good. She climbed the south side of the gate arch on its narrow inset stair, her left hand on the cold stone, her right hand carrying the staff. She came out on the top of the gate above the iron-bound doors, and she stood there for a count, looking out over the road north, the long, flat road north out of Lyrnholt that ran for a half-mile through the orchard ward, and then bent east-northeast for the river ferry at Salt Crossing. No travelers yet. A gray ribbon of road with frost on it. A small, pale animal moved at the edge of the orchard. A fox. She watched it cross the road and disappear into the further orchard. She came down the stair. Her gatemen were 3, Olm, Pris, and Eve. They had been with her the last 4 years of the war. They were good men. Olm was 44, broad and slow and patient, the senior of the 3. Pris was 32, dark-haired and small and quick, the kind who could read a face at 30 paces. Eve's was 19, the youngest, the sharpest at his eye, the fastest at the wicket bar. They came up to her as she came back into the gatehouse, and they bowed in the small Greymere watch bow. Hands the breast. She bowed back, hand to her breast. Olm said, "Lo, a quiet night." She said, "A quiet night." Pris said, "Lo, 2 riders north passed us at the 3rd hour. Couriers from Britwood. Their roll is on the desk." She said, "Mark them in the wax." Eve said, "Lo, Captain, Master Sern is below at the inner wicket. He has come up himself." She said, "Lo, at this hour." Eve said, "Lo, at this hour." She had not known Sern to come up to Northgate at first light in 3 winters. She said, "Send him in." Sern came in past her gatemen, with his small, gray-muzzled brown wolf birch at his heel, and his small white head, bare to the cold, and his pale, watery blue eyes, a little wet from the wind. He was 67. He had been master of the Lyrnholt watch roll for 41 years. He had been her first teacher when she had come to Lyrnholt at 16 with her seacoast accent and her hard hands and her mortal Greycliff blood. He had told her then that a watch captain is not a soldier and is not a clerk and is not a herald, that a watch captain is the smallest, most patient kind of priest a city can keep, a priest of the gate. She had not understood him at 16. She understood him now. He bowed to her in the watch bow. She bowed back. He set on her desk a small folded square of pale parchment, and beside it the morning's watch roll, the long folded paper she would expect every dawn. Sern said, "Lo, the watch roll first." She lifted it. She read each name through. 12 farmers from the 4 orchards of the North Ward expected today with their carts. 3 couriers from Britwood Hold expected before noon. 1 honey merchant from Salt Crossing. 1 small herd of sheep coming down from Greymere for the Treaty Day market. A delegation of 9 from the Black Lance camp, expected at the southern wall, but bound by treaty terms to send their 2 unarmed envoys to Northgate to walk in north to south through the city. That was the day's strange entry, and Maren had read it twice through last night and once again this morning. 2 unarmed envoys of the Black Lance, walking up to Northgate on the road from Salt Crossing, expected at the 10th hour, names not yet given. Sern had made a small circle around that line in his old careful hand. Sern said, "Lo, this second." He laid his hand on the small folded square of pale parchment. She lifted it. She read it again. Sern said, "Lo." "He will not walk the gates tonight at first dark. He has counsel until late." Maren did not look up at once. In 7 years, the King of Greymere had not missed walking the gates of Lyrnholt at first dark. Not in winter, not in fever week, not in the worst 3 nights of the 2nd year of the war. He came to every gate in his plain charcoal gray wool overcoat, with his bronze gate watchman's pin on the inside of his coat collar and his black-brown brindle wolf dressed at his heel, and he stood for account at each of the 4 gates of the city, exchanged the watch bow with each captain, and went on. He did not speak, he did not stay. He walked his lines the way a watchman walks his lines. She had bowed to him at Northgate 703 times. She had counted. She did not know whether he had counted or whether he had not. She said, "Lo, he will come at second dark." Sern said, "Lo, he will come." He paused. He said, "Lo, he has asked that a watch roll for the night be cut for him." She looked up at last. Sern's pale, watery eyes held her for account. He did not smile. He did not need to. He put his old veined hand on her sleeve at the elbow and let it sit there account, and then took it away. Sern said, "Lo, the king has asked that he be put on the watch roll for Northgate, second dark to dawn." Maren did not speak. Sern said, "Lo, as watchman, not as king." He put a small bronze pin down beside the wax tablet on the desk. It was a gate watchman's pin. Old bronze, dulled by years inside a coat collar, the Greymere gate pin of full watch. Sern said, "Lo, he has worn this one 19 years. He has asked me to bring it up to you. He has said that if he is to stand the watch, the captain of the gate ought to know what pin he carries." Maren laid the pin on the soft band of the countstone beside her own hand. Outside, the morning bell of Northgate began to ring. She did not lift her hand from the stone for a long count. The bell went on. Sern stood beside her. Birch sat at her boot. Kell did not stir on his cot. The frost held. When the bell stopped, she put the pin into the inner pocket of her gray-green watch cloak against her left breast, where her own pin sat on the inside of the same pocket, and she set her right hand on the chisel on its leather thong, and she cut the first notch of the day for the dawn courier of Britwood, who was, just then, riding up onto the cobbles of the road north. 412,007. She said, "Lo, mark him in the wax." Pris marked him in the wax. Sern bowed, she bowed, he went out. Birch went after him with the small, slow, patient gait of an old wolf. Kell of Southgate sat up at last on his cot and rubbed his face with the heel of his hand and said, "Lo, Captain, was that Master Sern?" She said, "Lo, that was Master Sern." He said, "Lo, is the king coming tonight?" She said, "Lo, he is coming tonight." She said no more than that. She did not need to. Kell knew her. She put the kettle on for the boy and went out to stand at the gate. She stood at the gate of Northgate, Lyrnholt, with her watch-staff in her right hand, the small pale frost on the cobbles of the road north under the morning's first thin gray, the countstone behind her holding 412,007 notches, and the king's bronze gate pin in the inner pocket of her watch cloak against her own. She did not yet think any thought she could put into a sentence about it. She only stood the gate. Out on the orchard road, the dawn courier of Britwood was just coming up to the cobbles, and a long white plume of his horse's breath went out before him into the cold. By the second hour after dawn, the morning's regular gate count was done. 12 farmers from the 4 orchards had come through with their carts, 8 of them with the small painted Greenmark house clamshell on the cart rail, 4 with the plain brown, the river ward. She had cut 12 notches in the soft band of the countstone, and Pris had marked 12 names in the wax. She had bowed the watchbow to old Theron of Pearlfield Orchard, and to his son Brock, and Theron had bowed back from his cart seat the same way he had bowed back at her every dawn for 7 years. And Brock had not bowed because Brock at 23 did not yet know how to bow without looking foolish, and Maren had found for one breath that it was impossible to be very afraid of the day, If Brock of Pearl Field Orchard was still on the road north with a cart of late apples and a face that did not yet know how to bow, then the dawn courier of Britwood went south with a sealed packet of council letters, and a second courier from Britwood came in his place from the north, and 4 river merchants came up the orchard road on foot with their hand carts, and a small boy from the gate village brought up 2 skins of milk for the gatehouse from his mother, and Pris marked them all in the wax. A honey merchant of Salt Crossing did not come. She marked his absence with a small dot beside his name on the roll. Honey merchant of Salt Crossing expected, not arrived. There would be a reason. There was always a reason. She would learn it tonight or tomorrow. At the 8th hour, the 2 unarmed envoys of the Black Lance came up over the bend of the orchard road. Maren saw them first from the top of the gate arch where she had gone to climb at 1/2 as a matter of habit. 2 figures walking, no horse, no banner, no retinue. 2 men in long brown wool cloaks, the kind a Greymere shepherd would wear, with no badge of their own house, no spear, no sword, not even the small belt knife a man would carry to cut his own bread. Their hands were down at their sides, open. They walked the long, flat orchard road at an even pace. They did not hurry. She came down the stair. She told Ulm to open the inner wicket. She told Pris to stand to the side of the wicket with the wax tablet ready, but not to bar the way. She told Eve to keep his eye on the orchard road behind the 2 men, and to ring his bell once if he saw any 3rd figure on the road behind them inside 1/2 mile. She herself went out through the inner wicket and stood on the cobbles 6 paces forward of the gate, alone, with her watch-staff in her right hand, her left hand at her side. She did not draw her watch-staff up. A captain of Northgate did not bring her watch-staff up at unarmed envoys, even if the unarmed envoys had walked up out of the camp of the Black Lance. She held it as she would have held it if she were standing on a market day at noon and a dispute between 2 corn sellers had come to her gate. When the 2 men were 10 paces out, she said, "Lo, halt." They halted. She said, "Names." A taller of the 2 said, "Lo, Aaron of Broonhollow of the Black Lance." His companion said, "Lo, Hael of Broonhollow of the Black Lance." "We are brothers," Maren said. "Purpose." Arryn said, "Lo, treaty council, by terms agreed in writing yestereve. 2 unarmed envoys of the Black Lance to walk through Lyrnholt, north to south, to enter the great hall by the south gate at the noon bell." She said, "You have any iron on you? Speak." Arryn said, "A small horn-handled belt knife each for bread, 2 cloak pins of bronze, no other iron." She said, "Show." Both men opened their cloaks slowly. She walked up to within an arm's length of each. She looked at the small, horn-handled belt knives. She looked at the cloak pins. She did not touch them. She nodded. She said, "Lo, Arryn of Broonhollow of the Black Lance, Hael of Broonhollow of the Black Lance. You walk through the gate of Northgate, Lyrnholt. You walk south on the inner street to the south wall. You do not turn east. You do not turn west. You do not enter any house. You do not enter any inn. You do not speak to any man not bearing the bronze gate pin. You will be met at the south wall by the captain of Southgate, who will walk you to the great hall. The walk is 1 hour. You will arrive at the 11th hour. The council convenes at the noon bell. You go through this gate at this hour. You go." Arryn said, "Lo, Captain." He bowed to her, the small Black Lance Hill country bow, hand to throat. Hael said, "Lo, Captain." He bowed. She did not bow back. A captain of Northgate did not bow at envoys of the army that had been at her wall for 3 years. She turned and she walked back through the wicket, 6 paces, and she stepped to the side, and she said, "Lo, Ulm, open the gate." Ulm opened the gate. Arryn and Hael of Brunhollow, of the Black Lance, walked through Northgate, Lyrnholt, on the morning of the treaty council at the 8th hour and a half. Maren did not look at them as they passed her. She listened to their footsteps. They were even-paced. She listened to their breathing. It was even-paced. They were very tired, both. She heard that. They had been walking since long before dawn. When they were 10 paces inside the gate, she lifted the chisel from its leather thong and cut 2 notches into the soft band of the countstone. 412,023. 24. Pris marked them in the wax. 2 names from the Black Lance, by their own giving, written in the Greymere gate's hand, in the wax of Maren's tablet, on the roll of Northgate, on the morning of the treaty council. Pris's pen did not shake. Maren had taught her not to let her pen shake. Olm closed the gate. Eve did not ring his bell. She went back into the gatehouse, and she sat down at the desk for the first time that morning, and she put her hand on the wax tablet, and she said, "Lo, get me the kettle." "Pris!" Pris brought the kettle. She drank a cup of the hot black tea Pris brewed too strong, and she did not say anything for a count of 40. At noon the bell rang, a long pale ringing at the highest of the 4 bell towers of the inner ward, a single deep note that ran out across the city and out across the cold orchard road and out, even, across the camp of the Black Lance 1 league south. The treaty council, by that bell, was convening in the great hall of Lyrnholt. The king of Greymere was, by that bell, walking in. The 17 lords of Greymere council were, by that bell, walking in. The 2 unarmed envoys of the Black Lance, Arryn and Hael of Brunhollow, were, by that bell, walking in. The 17 lords of the Black Lance, by the same terms, were sitting at the southern truce camp 1 league south, waiting on word. Maren did not stand for the noon bell. A captain of Northgate did not stand at her gate when the bell of the inner ward rang. She marked it on the wax tablet, "Noon bell, council convenes." She went out to walk her gate. Afternoon was very long. By the 2nd hour past noon, the orchard road had emptied. By the 3rd, the long, flat gray ribbon of cobbles north was as still as the orchard behind it. No carts, no couriers, no traveling herders. The whole of Lyrnholt had gone quiet behind her. Even her own gatemen, sitting low at their brazier, were not speaking. They were not even chewing their bread. They were waiting, with the gatemen's small, unspoken, patient way, for word from the great hall. Word did not come. By the 5th hour past noon, the first thin gold of the afternoon had gone hard and gray, and the cold had come back into the orchard road, and Maren had cut 6 more notches into the countstone. A courier coming north, a herder coming south, 4 returning farmers. And she had drunk 3 cups of Pris's tea, and she had walked the inner stair of North Tower up to the open roof at the top and back down again, 3 times, to keep her legs from setting. By the 6th hour, the noon bell rang again, the 2nd bell of the day, which was not in any old roll the noon bell rings, but which the bell towers had been instructed to ring this once when the council came out of its first sitting. Sern came up to Northgate with the watch roll for the 2nd sitting before the bell had stopped ringing. He bowed. She bowed. Sern said, "Lo, council adjourned at the 6th hour. Council reconvenes at the noon bell tomorrow." She said, "Lo, has the king come out?" Sern said, "Lo, he has not yet come out. He is still in the hall with the 2 envoys of the Black Lance. He has sent me up to give you his word." He laid a small folded square of pale parchment beside the countstone. She lifted it. She read it. It was 4 lines. The hand was even, not hurried, the small, slanted Greymere watchman's hand of a man who had been writing watch orders for a very long time. It said, "Captain, I will come up to the gate at full dark. I will stand the watch with you to the dawn bell. I will bring no retinue. Drust will come. I will come as watchman. I will bring my own watch staff." H. Maren read it 3 times. She said, "Lo, Sern." Set up a 2nd pallet on the tower roof beside mine. Sern said, "Lo, captain." He went. She stood at her desk for a long count. She had stood at her desk for long counts before. A gate captain of Lyrnholt did not move quickly when she did not need to. She put the small, folded parchment into the inner pocket of her watch cloak, against the bronze pin and against her own pin, and she set her right hand on the countstone, on the soft band, beside the chisel, and she said, low to herself, only to herself, The way she had said the small, private words to the Count Stone every morning of 7 years, only this once, with the thing she did not entirely have a name for. Very quiet, very flat. She said, "Lo, he is coming up." Outside, full dark was an hour and a half away. She went to Walker Gate. Drust came first. Maren saw him a count before she heard him, the long shape of a heavy black-brown brindle wolf coming out of the inner street into the gatehouse light, low to the cobbles, his ears half-cocked, his eyes the faint amber that wolf eyes go in lamplight, and he stopped in the open doorway of the gatehouse at 4 paces from her boot, and he looked up at her with the quiet courtesy of an old wolf entering a place he had not entered before. She said, "Lo, Drust." Drust came in another 2 paces and laid down across the threshold of the gatehouse at her boot. Eve at the wicket had not made a sound. Ulm had not made a sound. Pris had not made a sound. Kell was sitting up on his cot with his blanket clutched at his chin. A footstep came across the inner cobbles. Hael Thorne came in past Yves at the wicket, and he bowed, the small Greymere watchbow, hand to the breast. She bowed back, hand to her breast. She looked at him. He was 35. He was deep umber-brown of skin, with his close-cropped black hair gone to thin silver at the temples, with his closely trimmed dark beard, and his dark amber eyes, and the heavy shoulders of a man who had carried armor for half his life. He was in his long charcoal gray wool overcoat with the deep red of Greymere on the inner lining showing only at the cuffs of his sleeves where the lining had folded back. He had on his plain dark riding boots, well worn. He carried in his right hand a short, stout, iron-bound oak watch-staff, the same length and weight as her own, with the small worn bronze cap at the top that came of 19 years' standing on a gatestone. He had on the outside of his coat collar, where any man at any gate of any city would see it, a single dulled bronze gate watchman's pin. He had no crown, he had no chain of office, he had no retinue. He said, "Lo, Captain." She said, "Lo, watchman." He said, "Lo, I am entered on your roll for 2nd dark to the dawn bell." She said, "Lo, you are entered." She turned to the wax tablet. She set the tip of her chisel pen into the wax. She wrote, in the Greymere watchman's hand, H. Thorne, of the Whitlin Crag watch, full pin, 19 years, Northgate, 2nd dark to dawn. She did not write King. He stood at the desk and watched her write it. When she had set the tablet down, he reached one hand, very plainly, in the small, unhurried way that watchmen reach for things in a gatehouse, and he picked up the chisel on its leather thong by the Count's stone, and he looked at her, asking with his eyes only. She said, "Lo, cut yours." He cut a small notch into the soft band of the Count's stone, 412,136. Pris, at her stool by the wall, did not move. She had stopped breathing for 1 count. She started again. She wrote in the wax, H. Thorne, watchman, 2nd dark, through the Northgate. That was the first notch ever cut on the Northgate Countstone by a king of Greymere. Sern would have said so. Sern would have known to the year and the day. Sern was not in the room. Sern was downstairs in his small chamber under the gate arch, with his old wolf birch curled at his feet and the watch roll for the night on his lap, and he was, perhaps, smiling. Maren was not certain. She said low, "Sit at the brazier. I have water and bread." Hael Thorne sat at the brazier on the long iron-bound stool that her gateman had drawn up beside her stool 7 years ago, and that had sat empty on the far side of the brazier for 7 years. He sat as a watchman sits, not as a king sits, feet planted, knees apart, the watch-staff across his thighs in both hands, his back straight without rigidity, his weight even, his eyes on the door of the gatehouse. Drust laid across the doorway at his feet without lifting his head. Eve at the wicket stood with his bell at his hand and did not stir. She poured water into a tin cup. She broke off a piece of the dark gate bread Sern's wife had sent up that morning. She gave the cup and the bread to him. He took them. He said, "Lo, Captain, you have given a watchman bread out of the watch's own stock at his first hour." "I will pay for it," she said. "Lo." "You will not pay for it," he said. "Lo, I will pay for it on the roll." She said, "Lo, pay for it on the roll." 2 pence. He took 2 pence out of the inner pocket of his overcoat, and he laid them on the wax tablet beside the entry he had not written, but for which her own hand had been the writer. He ate the bread. He drank the water. He set the cup down on the iron of the stove. He set the bread end on the cup. He did not speak. She did not speak. A long count went by like that. A brazier crackled. Drust breathed slow at the door. Eve at the wicket did not stir. Ulm at the gate arch did not stir. Pris at the wax tablet did not stir. Kell had laid down again on his cot and gone to sleep with his fist shoved against his mouth. She said, at last, "Lo, you read the morning's roll." He said, "Lo, I read the morning's roll." She said, "You read Aaron of Brunhollow and Hael of Brunhollow." He said, "Lo, Aaron of Brunhollow and Hael of Brunhollow are second cousins of my mother's. Brunhollow is one valley west of Avonholt, where she was born. They are, in a small distant way, my own kin. I did not say so in the hall. They are not in this council to be the king's kin. They are in this council to be unarmed envoys of an army that has pressed our southern wall for 3 years. And they came up to the great hall of Lyrnholt at the noon bell, and they sat at the long table, and they spoke for the 17 lords of the Black Lance, and they spoke for 9 hours. She said, Lo, and he said, Lo, and tomorrow at the noon bell they will sit again, and the 17 lords of Greymere council and the 17 lords of the Black Lance will hear them again, and either we will agree the terms or we will not. She said, Lo, and tonight, he said, Lo, tonight I will stand a watch. She said, Lo, why this gate? He looked at her then. He had not looked at her at all yet since coming in. He had looked at the desk and at the countstone and at the brazier and at the door, the way a watchman entering a new gatehouse will look at the gatehouse first. He had not looked at her. Now he did. His dark amber eyes were warm at the bottom. His face was very still. He said, Lo, Northgate has not been breached. Northgate has been held by the captain on the roll for 7 years. Northgate is the only gate of this city I have not myself stood a long watch on in the 7 years of my crown. I have stood Southgate 41 nights. I have stood Eastgate 26. I have stood Westgate 11. I have not yet stood Northgate. I do not stand a gate that is held without me. He stopped to count. He said, Lo, and tonight is the last night. She did not say, last night before what? She did not need to. He did not say either. They both, captain and watchman, sat at the brazier of Northgate, with the bronze whistle on her wrist and the watch-staff in his hands, with Drust at the door and Pris at the wax, with the countstone at 412,136, with the noon bell tomorrow either ending the war or not ending it. And they did not say what they did not need to say. She said, Lo, then I am glad of you. He said, Lo, and I of you. A count went by. She stood up. She said, Lo, up to the roof. He stood up. She climbed the inner stair. He climbed behind her. Drust came after Drust, 62 steps. She had counted them 3 times in her first month at Northgate, and not since. He, she thought, would count them every step, the way a watchman entering a new tower counts steps the first time, and would not count them after tonight. They came out on the open roof of the north tower under the high, cold, pale stars of the north, and the great brazier on the roof was alive with the small, steady wood heart of a watchman's brazier, and the long, flat orchard road north was a thin, pale grey ribbon under the moon, and the camp of the Black Lance, 1 league south, was a far scatter of small orange points down behind the slope of the southern hill. He stood at the parapet. He laid his right hand on the cold stone. He stood still for a count of 50. He said, Lo, at Whitlin Crag, the south gate has a parapet of grey limestone at this height. I stood that gate from age 15 to age 24. I stood the dawn watch on it 597 mornings. The first morning my hand on the limestone in the cold was the morning my own brother told me he was leaving for court at the eastern line. The 597th morning was the morning my father's chamberlain came up to me with the writ that brought me to court myself, the year my brother married. I have not stood Whitlin Crag since. I have not gone back. I have written to the captain there 4 times a year for 11 years. She said, Lo, who is the captain there? He said, Lo, a man called Brune of Whitlin, who taught me. He is 64 now. He was 48 when I made full watch. He gave me this pin. He laid his free hand on the bronze pin on the outside of his coat collar. She said, Lo, a watchman never gives back his first pin. He said, Lo, he does not. She said, Lo, and yet. He said, Lo, and yet I have brought it up to your gate. I have not given it. I have brought it. She did not answer. Out on the orchard road, north very far, the first of the night couriers from Salt Crossing was coming up onto the cobbles. She heard him before she saw him. She heard the small, even hoofbeats of a single courier horse on cobbles a mile north, the way a watchman of 7 years hears the difference between 1 horse and 2 and 3. She said, "Lo, a single courier from Salt Crossing." He said, "Lo, I hear him." She said, "Lo, we will go down and let him in." He said, "Lo, Captain." He bowed her down the inner stair before himself. The small Greymere watchbow, the one a watchman gives to the captain of the gate he is standing on, hand to the breast, eyes lowered for 1 count. She bowed back. She went down. He came after. Drust came after. 62 steps the other way. Their brazier in the gatehouse was still burning. Pris was still at the wax. Olm was at the door now with Eve. A single courier from Salt Crossing was riding up the last 100 paces of the cobbles. She set her hand on the countstone and waited for him. And the King of Greymere stood beside her at the countstone, with his watch-staff in his hand and his bronze pin on the outside of his coat collar and his drust at the door, and the watch went on. By midnight the cold had come down hard. Frost on the cobbles of the inner cobbles had thickened in white feather shapes. Frost on the iron bands of Northgate's outer doors had thickened to the point where Olm, going forward to test the bar at the 11th bell, had to set both gloved hands on the bar before it gave under his weight. Frost on the leather strap of the long curved horn beside the wicket had thickened to a thin pale dust that came off in Maren's palm when she struck the strap with her watch-staff at the 11th bell, the way she had struck it at the dawn bell, the way she would strike it at every bell of the night. She and Hael Thorne walked the wall. A captain of Northgate did not stand still under a brazier through a long winter watch. A captain walked her wall every 2 hours, the long upper inset path between the gate arch and the small inner door at the foot of the east tower, and back. 640 paces each way. She had walked it 9,000 times. Hael walked beside her at her left hand, a half pace back, the way a watchman walks behind a captain on the captain's wall. He did not speak when she did not speak. He did not crowd her. He set his own pace against hers without effort, the way a man does who has walked many other walls in his time. When they came back to the brazier on the roof of the north tower, he did not sit. He stood with his hand on the parapet at the same place his hand had laid on the parapet in the first hour, looking out over the long, flat ribbon of the orchard road north, with the moon over the orchards behind him and the very far, thin scatter of the black lance fires 1 league south to his right. He said, "Lo, at my father's death, at the ford." She did not turn her head. She said, "Lo, you do not have to." He said, "Lo, I know I do not have to. I am saying it for myself, Captain, not for you." She said, "Lo, say it." He said, "Lo, at my father's death, at the ford, I was on the eastern bank with the second wing. I was 20 paces upstream from him when he fell. I did not see him fall. I saw the water go down the side of him, and I knew what had happened from the way the water went down the side of him. But I did not see him fall. I was riding to him when my brother went past me on the other side at full gallop, going toward him. An account later, my brother was the second man to fall. I did not see my brother fall either. I saw his horse come back across the water without him. After that, I was the king. I had been on the gate at Whitlin Crag 11 years before I came to court, and I had been at court 11 months before my father called the lords to ride south, and 3 days into the ride, I was a watchman of 19 years standing and a king of 3 days, all at once, at a ford in cold water, with my father's wolf corps coming up out of the water under his rider's body, swimming and going down again. She said, "Lo," and Drust. He said, "Lo." Drust came to me at Whitlin Crag the next week. He was a 1-year cub. She said, "Lo, he is yours." He said, "Lo, he is mine." A count went by. She said, "Lo, I have not lost a brother. I have one alive at the southern wall. He is 23. He is at the tournament guard. He has not been at the front. I have not lost a father. My father is 59 and sells fish at the wharf at Greycliff. My mother is 56. She makes the nets. I have not lost any of mine. I have stood the gate while many lost theirs." He said, "Lo, you have lost names. I have read your wax." She said, "Lo, I have lost names." He said, "Lo, a captain of a gate carries names she did not love." She said, "Lo, she carries them." A count went by. He said, "Lo, Maren of Greycliff." She did not turn her head. He had not, in 7 years, said her name to her. He had said captain. He had said Northgate. He had bowed 703 times. He had not said Maren of Greycliff. She said, "Lo, Hael Thorne." He did not turn his head. He said, "Lo, we will go down. There is a horse on the road behind us. She had heard it. There was a horse on the road behind them, on the inner cobbles, coming up at a brisk pace from the inner ward. Not a courier, a horse with the quick, light step of a noble saddle horse, and behind it, 2 more horses at the same pace. 3 horses. Coming up to her gate from inside her city at midnight, she went down the inner stair without speaking. He came after her. Drust came after Drust, 62 steps the other way for the second time that night. They came out into the gatehouse, and she said, "Lo, Pris, open the inner wicket only. Eve, your bell, Ulm, to the gate arch." 3 horses came up. A man was at the front in a long fox fur cloak, with his small pale grey wolf walking on a chain leash beside his horse, with a herald on a smaller horse at his right, and a man-at-arms in a quilted leather coat on a smaller horse at his left. He pulled up 4 paces in front of the inner wicket, and he set his horse so that he was looking down at her. He was Lord Whitlin of Southwatch. She had known him on sight for 11 years. She did not like him. She had never liked him. He said, his voice carrying across the gatehouse at the kind of volume a man uses when he does not yet know that the King of Greymere is standing 6 paces inside the gatehouse out of his line of sight. "Captain." She did not bow. A captain of Northgate did not bow to a lord of Southwatch on her own gate at midnight when the lord of Southwatch had come up at brisk pace and was looking down on her from a horse. She said, "Lo, Lord Whitlin." He said, "Captain, I have a letter for you." He held out his hand. His herald lifted out of his saddle pouch a folded square of pale parchment with the wax seal of the Council of Lords on it, broken, and he handed it down to her. She took it. She unfolded it. She read it. It was a letter of substitution. It was a request, in the form a letter of substitution takes in Greymere, that a noble lord, and not a common watchman, hold the post of Northgate during the formal hours of the Treaty Council, that the dignity of the Crown of Greymere be displayed before the envoys of the Black Lance, both at the noon bell of tomorrow and through the night preceding, in keeping with the custom of the Eastern Line. It named Lord Edric of Pell-Cross as substitute captain. It bore the names and seals of 4 lords. A letter of substitution required, by the bylaws of the Council of Lords of Greymere, the names and seals of 5. She folded it back up. She said, "Lo, Lord Whitlin. This letter is short by 1 signature. By the bylaws of the Council of Lords, this is not a standing letter." Lord Whitlin smiled. He said, "You are quite correct, Captain. The 5th signature will be obtained at the dawn bell from Lord Hael, who is at this hour at Pell-Cross Hold. Lord Edric is in my retinue. He will assume the post at the dawn bell the moment the 5th signature is on the letter. We have come up early so as to make a clean transition before the morning bells. The dignity of the council you will understand," she said. "Lo, Lord Whitlin. The letter of substitution is short. The captain of Northgate is on the roll. The captain of Northgate stands the gate," he said, smiling still, smiling more. "Captain. You are a fine captain. Have I said you are not? Northgate has not been breached on your watch. We are all very, very grateful to you, but the council is at the noon bell, and the crown is on display, and Lord Edric is—" A man stepped forward into Lord Whitlin's line of sight. Hael Thorne came forward into Lord Whitlin's line of sight from the inside of the gatehouse, with Drust at his heel and the bronze gate watchman's pin on the outside of his coat collar in plain view. He came up to within 2 paces of Maren's left shoulder. He did not speak. Lord Whitlin's smile dropped off his face like a stone going off a wall. Lord Whitlin said, "Very low, your grace." Hael Thorne said, "Lo, Lord Whitlin." He did not say cousin. He could have said cousin. He did not. Hael Thorne said, "Lo, the letter." Maren handed him the letter. He read it. He took as long over it as a watchman takes over a letter at a gatehouse at midnight. He read it twice. He folded it. He held it out to Lord Whitlin. Hael Thorne said, "Lo, Lord Whitlin. This letter is short by 1 signature. By the bylaws of the Council of Lords, it is not a standing letter. I am not on it. The King of Greymere has not signed it. The King of Greymere will not sign it at the dawn bell or at any other bell. The captain of Northgate is on the roll. The captain of Northgate stands the gate. The dignity of the crown of Greymere is this night in the inside pocket of my coat in the form of the gate watchman's pin I have worn 19 years, and on the soft band of the count stone in the form of the 412,136 notches Captain Maren of Greycliff has cut for the souls who have come and gone through this gate in 7 years, and not, I think, on the saddle of any horse standing on cobbles at midnight in front of this gate. You will go. You will take Lord Edric. You will take your herald. You will go." Lord Whitlin took the letter back into his gloved hand without a word. Lord Whitlin said, "Lo, your grace." "Captain." Lord Vailin turned his horse. He did not bow. The herald bowed. Lord Edric of Pelcross, whom Maren had not even noticed in the back of the small retinue, bowed twice, with the quick, anxious bow of a man who has been brought up to a gate to be a substitute captain, and is glad not to be one. Pel, the small, pale grey wolf on the chain leash, was already walking the way Lord Vailin wanted him to walk, on the chain. Drust at Hael Thorne's heel, watched the chain leash in plain disapproval, the way an old wolf watches a thing that is wrong, but not his to set right. Lord Vailin and his 3 horses went back down the inner cobbles. Maren stood at the inner wicket of Northgate, on her own gate, with her watch-staff in her right hand and her watch-cloak around her, and she did not move for a count of 40. Hael stood at her left shoulder. Pris had not breathed. Olm had not breathed. Eve had not rung his bell. Drust laid himself down across the line of the wicket, the way a wolf lays himself down across the line of a door he has decided is closed. When the sound of the 3 horses had gone out of the inner cobbles, she said, "Lo, watchman." He said, "Lo, captain." She said, "Lo, brazier." He said, "Lo, brazier." They went back to the brazier. He sat. She sat. He set his watch-staff across his thighs. She set hers across hers. Pris brought the kettle. He drank a second cup. She drank a second cup. He did not speak. She said, "Lo, you did not need to come out." He said, "Lo, I needed to come out." She said, "Lo, why?" He said, "Lo, because if a lord of Southwatch comes up to a captain of Northgate at midnight and tries to take a captain off her own roll, he does not do it without the King of Greymere standing where he can see him. I would have come out at any captain's gate for that. I came out faster for yours." She said, "Lo, faster." He said, "Lo, faster." A count went by. She said, "Lo, mark him in the wax." Pris said, "Lo, captain?" Pris marked Lord Vailin of Southwatch and Herald and Lord Edric of Pelcross in the wax tablet of Northgate, with the small square notation Maren had taught her 10 years ago for a turned-back party at the gate. Turned, not through. Maren cut no notch on the countstone. A man who did not pass the gate did not get a notch. Out on the orchard road north, the first thin sound of a single distant horn rose up. A single horn. It was a long horn, deep, the kind of horn the Black Lance used to call its forward rider's home. Greymere did not blow that horn. Greymere had not, in 3 years of war, lifted a Black Lance horn even at the moment of taking one in trade. A single horn, low, very far, somewhere out on the orchard road, north past the bend at Pearlfield Orchard. Eves at the wicket lifted his small bell. He did not ring it yet. Maren stood up at the brazier. She said, "Lo, Olm, the gate." Eve, to the high. The Olm went to the gate arch. Eve went up the inner stair to the high. He moved fast and silent, the way she had taught him in the 2nd year of the war, when Eves had been 17 and a dough-faced new boy at the wicket who did not know how to move in his boots. Pris stood up. She set the wax tablet onto the iron-bound stool. She lifted the gate roll into her arms. She crossed the gatehouse at her quiet, quick step, and she went into the small inner chamber at the foot of the south tower with the gate roll, and she shut the inner chamber door behind her with one breath, and she would not open it again by Maren's standing order until either Maren or Olm or Eve came to knock at it 3 times, slow. That was the gate roll's standing order. The gate roll did not stand at the open gate. The gate roll lived through even when the gate did not. Hael Thorne stood up beside her at the brazier. He did not pick up his watch-staff. He laid it across the iron-bound stool. He picked up, instead, from his belt, a short, broad, iron-handled knife with a pale leather grip, the kind a Whitlin Crag watchman of 19 years would carry against his hip and not draw at any time other than the time it was the only thing left to draw. He did not draw it. He set his hand on it. Drust came up from the door. Drust did not lay back down at the door. He laid himself down at her left boot. His ears were forward. He was not making a sound. Maren said, "Lo, watchman?" He said, "Lo, captain." She said, "Lo, you will stand at my left shoulder." He said, "Lo, captain." She said, "Lo, you will not draw your iron unless I lift my staff?" He said, "Lo, captain." She said, "Lo, you will take orders at my gate from me." He said, "Lo, from you." She said, "Lo, up." She climbed the inner stair to the high, at her own pace, not hurried, the pace a captain climbs at when there is a single horn on the road and not 3. He climbed behind her. Drust came after Drust. At the top of the north tower, Eves was already at the parapet with his small bell at his hand and his eyes north. Eves said, "Lo, Captain, 3 horses on the road, half a mile out. They are coming hard. They are not the envoy's people. The envoy's people are camped on the other side of the river bend." She said, "Lo, 3. Eve said, "Lo, 3. There is a 4th horn behind them a half-mile further north, behind the bend at Pearlfield. They will not get here from there before the dawn bell." She said, "Lo, send up the 2nd watch from Eastgate. Tell Sern, send Kell." Eve said, "Lo, Captain." Eves rang his bell once, twice, 3 times, the inner ward signal for a small attack on a quiet gate, which the captain of Eastgate would know on the 2nd ring and the captain of Westgate on the 3rd. And Eve was already on the inner stair going down for Kell. Kell of Southgate at 12 was not asleep any longer. Kell of Southgate at 12 had been waiting for that bell since the brazier. He would run. She said, "Lo, watchman." Hael Thorne said, "Lo, captain." She said, "Lo, 3 on the road." He said, "Lo, 3 on the road." She said, "Lo, you and Druss take the inner wicket. Ulm takes the gate arch. I take the gate." He did not argue. He said, "Lo, captain." He went. Drust went after Drust, 62 steps the other way for the 3rd time that night. She heard them go. She did not turn her head. She heard Hael come into the gatehouse at the foot of the stair. She heard him take his place at the inner wicket. She heard him say, "Lo, Ulm," to the gate arch. She heard Ulm bow, hand to breast, in the gate watchman's bow of taking an order on a captain's gate from the 2nd of the watch. She came down then. She came out through the inner wicket onto the cobbles in front of Northgate, alone, with her watch staff in her right hand and the small bronze whistle on her left wrist. And she stood at her gate, 6 paces forward of the iron-bound doors, on the cold cobbles in the moonlight, with the long, flat orchard road north in front of her, and she set her boots even, and she waited for the 3 horses. 3 horses came up at a hard pace, and they pulled up, hard, 6 paces in front of her, on the cobbles. And she saw at once that they were not Black Lance regulars, and they were not Greymere regulars, and they were not councilmen, and they were not couriers. They were 3 young men in the small light leathers of the Black Lance forward riders, with their faces wrapped in the brown wool the forward rider scouts wrapped their faces in, and they had the long, thin spears of the forward riders, and they had a small, dark brown wolf with an injured foreleg, running on 3 legs at the heel of the center horse. The center rider was a boy of maybe 20. The right-hand rider was older, perhaps 30, with the spear lifted across his saddle. The left-hand rider was a woman, perhaps 22, with her spear down along the side of her horse, where a forward rider holds the spear at the moment before she has decided whether to throw it. A boy at the center lifted his free hand. He said, in the kind of Greymere, a Black Lance forward rider learns from listening, "Captain." We did not know the gate was held tonight by the captain. She said, "Lo, names, purpose." He said, "Lo, we did not come to the gate." We were coming up the orchard road from the bend at Pearlfield on a forward run. Our rider's horn went out half a mile ago because our wolf was... He did not finish. Maren saw at that moment in the moonlight that the small dark brown wolf at the heel of the center horse was on 3 legs because his foreleg was tied with a strip of pale linen, and that the linen was not new, and that the wolf had been on 3 legs for at least a day. The wolf was not bleeding. The wolf was not whining. The wolf was running. He was, in plain terms, a wolf trying to keep up with 3 horses that were going slower for him than 3 horses would normally go, and 3 forward riders of the Black Lance who had plainly refused to leave the wolf behind. She said, "Lo, you are off your line. You are within bowshot of a Greymere city wall on the night before the treaty council. You are armed. You will turn now and go back the way you came. I do not blow my whistle. I do not lift my staff. You will turn and go," he said. "Lo, captain, the wolf cannot run further." She said, "Lo, the wolf will not run further on the cobbles north of Northgate." A woman on the left lifted her spear a fraction. It was a small motion. It was a forward rider's motion. It was the motion that came before throw. It was not at Maren. It was past Maren's left shoulder at the inner wicket, where Hael Thorne had come up to the wicket to see what Maren was facing. Maren had heard him come up. She did not turn her head. She had taught him, in their hour at the brazier, that the 2nd of the watch did not show his face at the wicket while the captain stood out forward of the gate. But he had come up because Drust at his heel had told him without speaking, the way a wolf does, that the spear hand of one of the 3 forward riders had moved. Maren did 3 things at once. She blew her whistle, 1 short blast. Eves at the high heard it and rang his bell again, the inner ward signal for spear at gate. She lifted her watch staff to her left shoulder in the captain's lift, which Ulm at the gate arch and Hael at the wicket would each read as draw. but which she was not taught to use as draw, and never had used as draw, and had only used to mean, "This gate is at the edge of breach, and you will be ready," she said. Low, very flat, very quiet, very even Drust. Drust came out under the inner wicket bar, low to the cobbles like a long black-brown shadow with the brindle moonlight on his back, and he set himself between her right boot and the center horse, and he laid himself down. He did not snarl. He did not lift his head. He did not show his teeth. He laid himself down across her right boot, like a wolf laying himself down across the line of a door he had decided was closed, and the center boy's horse took one step back without being asked. She did not throw her spear. A man on the right lowered his. Their center rider said, "Lo, Captain." He bowed in the saddle, the small black lance hill country bow, hand to throat. He said, "Lo, we will turn." She said, "Lo, you will turn. You will go back the way you came. You will not come up to this gate again. You will tell your riders that the captain of Northgate did not blow the long whistle. You will tell your 17 lords that a Greymere wolf laid himself down across the captain's boot at the gate of the city on the night of the treaty council and held the line without his teeth. You will tell them what you will tell them. You will go," he said. "Lo, Captain, the wolf at our heel." She said, "Lo, the wolf at your heel does not come through this gate. The wolf at your heel does not stay at this gate. The wolf at your heel goes back with you. You will carry him on your saddle if his foreleg has gone. You will not leave him." He bowed again. He bowed lower this time. He did not say a word. He turned his horse. The other two turned theirs. The boy reached down and lifted the small, dark brown wolf with the tied foreleg up onto his saddle in front of him in one slow, even motion. And the wolf did not protest, and the boy set his free hand at the wolf's withers, and the 3 horses went back up the cobbles, north at a slower pace than they had come down. Maren stood at her gate for a long count after they had gone. Drust did not move from across her boot. When the 3 horses were past the bend at Pearlfield Orchard, and the second small horn call of the further forward party had come back once and not come again, she lowered her watch-staff. She blew her whistle once long. She came back through the inner wicket. Hael Thorne stood at the inner wicket. He did not say anything. He looked at her face for a count. He said, "Lo, Captain." She said, "Lo, watchman." He said, "Lo, you did not lift the long whistle." She said, "Lo, I did not need to." He said, "Lo, you did not lift your staff to draw." She said, "Lo, I did not need to." He said, "Lo, you held the line with a wolf and a whistle." She said, "Lo, he held the line. I only set the boot for him." A count went by. He said, "Lo, Maren of Greycliff." She said, "Lo, Hael Thorne." He said, "Lo, you are a captain of a kind I do not ever again expect to see at one of my gates." She said, "Lo, you will see me at my gate every dawn bell of every winter for as long as I am the captain of Northgate." He said, "Lo, I will." A 3rd hour past midnight came up over them with the first thin gray of an eastward sky, the way the 3rd hour comes up at a gatehouse in the cold, very slow, very far, very quiet. And Maren of Greycliff cut 3 notches into the soft band of the countstone for 3 forward riders of the Black Lance who had come down to her gate and not come through by the small rule a captain of Northgate had been taught at her first gate, that the countstone took what came to the gate, even when the gate had not opened. 412,198, 99, 200. Pris came out of the small inner chamber. She marked them in the wax. She did not look up at Hael for a count, and then she did. And then she went on writing. Drust was not lame. Drust had not been struck. Drust had not even shown his teeth. Drust laid back down across the door. Hael Thorne sat on his stool at the brazier. He did not speak. He did not need to. Their watch went on to the dawn bell. Dawn came up gray and clean. A long, thin gray ribbon of cloud went out across the eastern sky behind the inner ward of Lyrnholt. Frost on the cobbles outside the gatehouse had hardened to a small bright sheet in the last hour of the night, and now, under the first color of the morning, the sheet was beginning to turn from gray to pale gold at the eastern edges. Smoke from the gatehouse brazier went up straight in the cold air without a breath of wind. Maren stood at her countstone, with the chisel on its leather thong in her right hand and her left palm flat on the soft band, and she heard the dawn bell of the inner ward ring once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, the long count of the morning bell in Lyrnholt at the end of a winter watch. When the bell stopped, she said, "Lo, watchman." Hael Thorne stood up from his stool at the brazier. He said, "Lo, Captain." She said, "Lo, your watch is over. You came on at second dark. You go off at the dawn bell. The count stone reads 412,203. You have cut one notch in this stone, that being the only notch ever cut in this stone by a king of Greymere. You have signed the wax tablet under the watchman's hand. You have paid 2 pence at the brazier for the bread. You stand off the watch. He bowed, the small Greymere watchbow, hand to breast. She bowed back. He went out under the wicket, with Drust at his heel. He did not go far. She knew he had not gone far. She knew it because Drust's footfalls had stopped 6 paces past the wicket on the cobbles outside, and because Hael's footfalls had stopped at the same count, and because Sern's footfalls, coming up the inner cobbles from the inner ward at his slow, patient gait, had reached the outer cobbles a moment after the king's. She heard Sern bow. She heard Hael bow back. She heard Sern say, "Lo, your grace," and Hael say, "Lo, master." Sern came in. Sern bowed to her. She bowed back. He laid the watch roll for the day on her desk. Sern said, "Lo, council reconvenes at the noon bell. By a vote of 14-3 at last night's adjournment, the Council of Lords has agreed to hear the second sitting under the same terms as the first, with the same envoys at the table and no letter of substitution at the gate." She said, "Lo, master." She did not say more than that. Sern said, "Lo, he waits at the cobbles outside, captain. He has not gone in." She said, "Lo, I will come out." Sern bowed. He went past her to the count stone, and he laid his old, veined hand, for one breath, flat on the soft band beside the chisel, the way he had laid it for her 10,000 mornings. And he went to the brazier, and sat on the stool the king had got off, and he pulled his old wolf birch's head onto his knee, and he did not look up. Maren went out through the wicket. Hael Thorne stood on the cobbles outside the gatehouse, at 6 paces, with his back to the gate and his face to the long, flat orchard road north, and his charcoal gray wool overcoat thrown over the bronze pin on his coat collar, and Drust at his heel, and his watch staff in his right hand, and his other hand at his side. The sky behind him was the very first thin gold of the dawn over the orchard. He did not turn at her step. She came up beside him. She did not stand at his left shoulder. She stood at his right. They were the same height to within an inch. They stood at the same line. He said, "Lo, captain." She said, "Lo, watchman." He took out of the inner pocket of his coat a small folded square of pale parchment, very old, very softly creased, the corners of it worn round with 4 years of being kept inside a coat pocket against a man's left breast. He said, "Lo, this was written by my hand the 2nd week after I came to the throne. It has no other hand on it. It has the king's seal that I would not give to any other writ for the 1st year of my crown. It is dated 4 years past. It names by the words you will see if you open it, the captain of Northgate of Lyrnholt as senior captain of the king's own houseguard, with the gate's pay doubled and the gate's roll kept. I had not delivered it because I had been told by Master Sern, very early on, that to deliver it would have been to take the captain off the gate. I did not wish to take the captain off the gate. I have carried it for 4 years. I will not deliver it tonight either. I will not, in fact, deliver it. I am holding it up to the captain of Northgate so that the captain of Northgate may see it, and may know that for 4 years there has been a king's writ in a king's pocket with her name on it, and that the king has not delivered it because he had a captain at the gate he did not wish to lose. He held the writ out at the level of his hand. He did not push it at her. He held it. She did not take it. She lifted her right hand. She laid her right palm flat across the writ in his hand, the way her morning palm laid flat on the soft band of the count stone, and she stood like that for one breath. She said, "Lo, you will keep it." He said, "Lo, I will keep it." She said, "Lo, you will give me instead a writ at this morning's hand, dated this morning, with the king's seal at this morning's wax. The writ will say only the thing that is already true, that Maren of Greycliff is the captain of Northgate of Lyrnholt on the king's roll by the king's hand, that she stands the gate, that the gate is hers as the captain of a gate is the captain of a gate in Greymere, that the king of Greymere set his name to that this morning after the watch in which the king stood, the 2nd pin at her brazier, and so it is now a matter of record. That is the writ I will take." A count went by. He said, "Lo, captain." He did not smile. His face did not move. His dark amber eyes went a fraction warm at the bottom and held there. He folded the old writ and put it back into the inner pocket of his coat against his left breast. He said, "Lo, you will have it before the noon bell. I will write it at my own hand. Master Sern will bring it up." She said, "Lo, Master Sern will bring it up." He said, "Lo, Maren of Greycliff." She said, "Lo, Hael Thorne." He said, "Lo, I will come up to your gate at first dark. I will come without retinue and without writ. I will come as a watchman walking his lines at first dark, the way a man walks his lines. You will perhaps give me a small piece of bread out of the watch's stock at 2 pence. You will perhaps set a stool beside yours at the brazier. I will not stand the night again on a roll that is not mine to stand on. I will sit account and I will go. She said, Lo. You will sit account and you will go. He said, Lo, until. She said, Lo, until. Account went by. He bowed. The small Greymere watchbow, hand to breast. She bowed back, hand to her breast. He turned. He went up the inner cobbles toward the inner ward in the long charcoal gray wool overcoat, with Drust at his heel and the bronze pin on the outside of his coat collar in plain view of any man at any window of any house on the inner cobbles of Lyrnholt who might happen to look out at his king at the first hour of the dawn. He did not look back. Drust looked back once the way an old wolf will, and then walked on. Maren stood at the cobbles outside Northgate for a long count. She went back inside. Sern was still on the stool at the brazier. Birch was still on his knee. Pris had come out of the inner chamber. Olm was at the gate arch. Eves was on the high. Kell of Southgate was sitting up on his cot with his blanket around his shoulders, watching her without a word. She went to the countstone. She set her right hand on the soft band. She said, Lo, to the stone only 203. He has gone off the watch. She did not say it aloud. She did not need to. Sern did not look up. Pris did not look up. Olm and Eve and Kell did not need to be told. At the noon bell, the Council of Lords of Greymere and the 17 Lords of the Black Lance and the 2 unarmed envoys Arryn and Hael of Brune Hollow, who had passed through Northgate on Maren's roll at the 8th hour and a half of the morning of the day before, sat at the long table in the great hall of Lyrnholt. And at the 2nd hour past noon, they agreed the terms of the treaty by 28 votes to 6, and the war was over. Sern came up to Northgate at the 3rd hour past noon with the small folded square of pale parchment Hael Thorne had written at his own hand, the writ of one morning's date with the king's seal in fresh wax, the only thing on it being the thing that was already true. She took it. She put it into the inner pocket of her watch cloak, against her own gate pin, and against the king's old gate pin, which she would, after the supper bell, walk back across the inner cobbles and return to him without a word, knowing he would take it back without a word and put it on the inside of his coat collar where he had worn it for 19 years before he had brought it up to her gate at first dark. She went out to walk her gate. An orchard road north under the first thin gold of the afternoon ran out flat and clean for a half-mile, the way it had run out flat and clean for 7 years. An old Theron of Pearlfield Orchard came up over the bend with a cart of late apples for the inner ward markets at the slow, even pace he had come up over the bend at every dawn bell of every winter she had been at the gate, and he bowed to her at his cart seat, and she bowed back at her gate. Brock of Pearlfield Orchard, behind his father, did not yet know how to bow. Brock would learn, in time. Maren of Greycliff, captain of Northgate of Lyrnholt, on the king's roll by the king's hand in the 7th year of her gate and the first day of the peace, lifted the small iron chisel on its leather thong and cut the next notch into the soft band of the countstone for the cart of late apples coming through her gate, the way she had cut every notch on the stone for 7 years, and the way she would cut every notch on the stone for as many years more as the gate kept her. 412,204. Outside the gatehouse, on the cobbles north, Brock of Pearlfield Orchard set his cart rein down on the rail, and looked at his father, and looked at her, and gave it his best try, and bowed, hand to his breast, with all the ease and grace and dignity of a corn merchant's son of 23 trying to bow at a gate captain in front of his father. And Maren of Greycliff did not laugh aloud, because she did not laugh aloud at her gate, but she let her quiet smile take a long count to arrive, and an even longer count to leave. And before the long, thin gray ribbon of the orchard road north had gone fully gold under the afternoon, she had bowed back